All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here, talking real music in real time for real people just like you and just like me. All right, so this video brought to you by my friends at Page 99. Yeah, this is a band. They kind of combined two of their favorite things and made a name out of it. Page from Pages and 99 from Toto's 99. So you know what kind of music this is. This is that super smooth West Coast, great guitar solos, great vocals, great material from start to finish. Check this album out if you have an opportunity to do so. You won't be disappointed. You can stream it and then go buy a copy. They also sell t-shirts and they're really good people. Page 99. It's the kind of music you used to hear in the late 70s and early 80s all the time. So I want to talk a little bit about a Steve Perry song that people should know about. And I actually talked about this like 4 years ago. And I don't know if anybody really paid much attention to that video I did, but this happens to be, I think, one of Steve Perry's best vocal moments. And you won't hear about this on YouTube very much because they're still trying to focus on things like, geez, Stone in Love, that should have been a big hit song for Journey. And I'm like, did you grow up in the 80s? Did you listen to rock radio stations? Apparently not, because you're only supposed to just check out the Billboard Hot 100 or Top 40 or whatever to, get your talking points for your videos. Now, I lived through it, and there were different formats. And quite honestly, Steve Perry was on a few of them, right? So, rock, mainstream rock, and adult contemporary, top 40. So there are a lot of different formats that Perry was basically crossing over to. But that all changed in the 1990s. You actually had a new chart show up in the 90s, which basically focused on what they call alternative adult contemporary, because they didn't have anywhere to put this music and it wasn't on top 40. And, all of these artists came along who had pretty much the same sound. It was very quirky and, lacked the same kind of happy spirit and melody that most of the music from the 80s had. Needless to say, there were a few exceptions to that rule, like Celine Dion and Elton John and Phil Collins, who were still kind of trucking along. Eric Clapton had a pretty good decade. But then you get to Steve Perry. And Steve Perry put out a solo album for the Love of Strange Medicine. Didn't do all that well, really. Fans are kind of mixed on that album. And then he calls up Jonathan Cain, gets Journey back together again. And Journey puts out a masterpiece called Trial by Fire. And then we all know the long, torturous story about Perry not wanting to tour because of an injury, and then not wanting to get the surgery. And then he eventually did get the surgery, but he made the boys wait a long time. And while he was waiting, or at least the boys were waiting, Perry was off creating something, one of his best songs ever, with two really spectacular musicians and musical figures, Carol Bear Sager and David Foster. Foster would produce this song for this movie called The Quest for Camelot, which really bombed. It was an animated movie. It was supposed to be in the same vein as things like Toy Story and The Lion King and all that stuff. And during the 90s, these movies still had really great soundtracks. And some of those songs were actually getting on the radio still. And I think with Perry here, they thought, hey, we've got a ringer. If anything, Perry, who I think actually appears in the movie as an animated character, playing himself or playing someone will know this. I don't, because I've never watched Quest for Camelot, but he's in there. And what's interesting, though, is he just nails this particular song that he and Foster and Carol Bear Sager wrote. In fact, if you were going to take a portion of your catalog and recycle it, reboot it, and put it back out there, maybe remaster it and say, hey, radio stations, even today, I would say, Lost Steve Perry track should have been all over adult contemporary radio. And why it's not to this day is really a big time head scratcher. If you're a fan of Steve Perry, this is one of his finest musical performances ever. There's a note that he hits at the end of this song that, again, those little hairs in the back of your neck, they'll start just, yeah, it's just spectacular. Even if you're not a Perry fan, you got to admit, from a musical standpoint, to have Perry, Carol Bear Sager, and David Foster all on one track. And then studio musicians like Waddy Wachtel and Michael Landau and his buddy Randy Goodrum playing keyboards. This is a top-notch band. It also includes the late, great Larry London playing drums. And Larry, of course, worked with Journey when they went out on tour without Steve Smith and Ross Valerie. And they replaced, that was the first time they replaced the rhythm section. And that was, both Randy Jackson and Larry London who went out there, and they did a great job. Perry loved this guy. He was a great drummer. He was a pocket drummer, which Perry, for some reason, that is his thing. And on this particular track, maybe the song was a little bit too pompous. Maybe it was too orchestral. It was too classical. And that was what David Foster had really gotten into. He was really big into super high quality production, but he was more into the new technology that was coming out in the 80s and really incorporating that. But in the 90s, he became more classical in his focus, as he himself is a great keyboard player. So I think this was right up his alley. The composition, like I said, includes Carol Bear Sager, who has won countless, or at least nominated for countless Grammy Awards. Two of her biggest songs, That's What Friends Are For, and Arthur's Theme, The Best That You Can Do, Christopher Cross. Spectacular moments that are now kind of part of the American contemporary music soundbook. Yeah, even if you're not into that kind of music, which I am, I like it. I like it in occasional dosages, because most of the time I have to kind of hear something a little bit more upbeat. But both of those songs are genius, and obviously #1 songs as well. This one could have been a #1 song if it was, 15 years prior to when it came out, or if you had some actual promotions going on. You had A&R guys working the phones like they used to back in the old days. I mean, we're talking late 90s here. What's really interesting, though, is when this song was probably recorded, comes out pretty late in 1998. Perry quit Journey, I think, in April of 1998. That's when the ink dried on that amazing contract, which gave Journey the name, but it gave Perry a whole bunch of those profits moving forward for, I think, forever, in perpetuity. But needless to say, I think Perry was already plotting what he was going to do. And I think if this song had caught on like it should have, quite honestly, I think Perry would have went into the studio and recorded an album with David Foster, which would have been amazing. And he would have probably gotten some songwriting help from Carol Bear Sager and from Randy Goodrum and anybody else he wanted to bring in to his orbit. I mean, that would have been amazing, but it didn't happen. And like a lot of things in Perry's career, it was like a moment where things were going really good, and then all of a sudden it stops. All right, whether that's self-inflicted or circumstances. His first band that he was in, I think one of the guys was killed in a car accident, and then that just stopped, and then Journey comes along, that was going great, and then that just stopped. All right, although that was like a 10-year thing, and then it just stopped. Anyway, it's just kind of weird. And of course, he had all that time away from the music business, and maybe he just got discouraged, you know. But this song here, let me just finish up by saying this song is a masterpiece. Steve Perry hits a note at the end of this song, which again, those little hairs in the back of your neck, yeah, they'll curl up again. Spectacular vocal. Perry is in between too. He's not the young Steve Perry anymore, and he's not the current Steve Perry. He's kind of in the middle. So he's much more mature vocally here, but he's still able to hit all of these real difficult notes. And the song was written for somebody who could sing, obviously. And David Foster wanted the crescendo at the end. He wanted the big climactic ending, and he got it, and Perry delivered on it. There's even a video of Perry singing this song, which I think should be remastered and put out there, re-released. Again, I don't think Perry owns this stuff. I think it's all CBS, and of course Perry gets a portion of it, but he doesn't really have control over what they're going to do with it. Do you think Steve Perry might sell his music catalog to somebody who might actually spread it around? If anything, Steve Perry, especially his solo material, is so underplayed or underexplored. The Street Talk album, which has several really good songs on it that should have been on the radio and should still be on the radio today, but weren't big as far as chart success, but would sound so good. You know, I mean, go listen to Street Talk. I have the extended version with all the extra tracks that they left off the original, and there's tons of material. For the Love of Strange Medicine, you could revisit that too. I'm not saying that's a bad album. It's just an album I think that would have been better if it wasn't 1994. I think you take 3 or 4 years off of that. If that comes out in 1990, in 1991, and the bridge in You Better Wait wasn't so weird. That's just a weird bridge in that song. And I think they're really trying to kind of fit in to 1994 and what's happening musically. Write a different bridge to that song, and I think that's a bigger hit because the rest of the song is really good. In any event, check out I Stand Alone, David Foster, Carol Bear Sager, Steve Perry. And, you know, other than Separate Ways, I can't think of a song that Perry is more challenged vocally and where he has to deliver in a way that really separates him from everybody else. And at that moment, I'm telling you, Steve Perry could have enjoyed a great revival if there were promotions behind this song, if the record label, and of course, if the movie had done really well, then people would have been, hey, what's that song we heard? Steve Perry? I love Steve Perry. Isn't he in Journey? Nope, at that moment, he was not in Journey anymore. So that was his first foray into the world without Journey, as far as after that breakup, which was going to be permanent. Very interesting. That could have changed his entire career, because I think he would have been inspired to go in the studio and put out a full album with David Foster and Carol Bear Sager. Would have been nuts, would have been amazing. So yeah, that's it. Little speculation video here. What coulda, shoulda, woulda, didn't happen for Steve Perry fans. It's a great song, and go listen to it if you haven't heard it. I Stand Alone.